Welcome back to my channel. This time it's another battle report with the Cultists, and they are facing off against Undying Dynasties. So I've been tailoring this Cultist list a bit, and eventually I came up to this conclusion, basically. So I do have the two big blocks of Possessed. I do have the Clawed Fiends that have really proven their worth. I have two Titan Slayer Chariots to be able to pressurize single models of my opponent a bit more, the gigantic models, because otherwise I feel like in the army I don't really have a good answer to those. And I put in now some lemurs just to test them out. I'm not really sure about those yet. I think I will replace them with some succubi later. That are going to have some better fighting capabilities. Now we go to the Undying Dynasties list. So my opponent tried to make a list that deviates a little bit from the usual Undying Dynasties list. So it doesn't have a catapult. It doesn't have a lot of shooting. It's quite an aggressive list in terms of wanting to go into combat, and it also doesn't feature a big block of skeleton chariots. So, but it does feature the Pharaoh with Godslayer, and I think this is really a good choice for the Undying Dynasties because it's just a very sturdy character. And this Doom Harbinger with the Scourge of Kings is, I think it's really insane because you go to like 7 attacks with strength 4, I believe, so that doesn't sound too impressive except for the fact that it's 7 attacks. But he does have poison, he does have battle focus, he does have lethal strike, he has hatred in some way or something with some reroll to it. And he gives the unit of Necropolis card that he is in also all kinds of bonuses. And then in the end, this unit of, well, it is 600 points, but it can really go toe to toe with a lot of units out there. Yeah, so let's see what's going to happen. Here's some picture of the models that I use to play the Cultists. So I use my Dread Elves as the Cultists and the Possessed, and then I have these Grix models to stand in as demons. The spells I got on my Wizard Master: Spear of Infinity, Spectral Blades, Ancestral Aid, and Whispers of the Veil. And on my Wizard Adept I took Stars Line and Know Thine Enemy. So I have some redundancy in there with Stars Line and Ancestral Aid, so I can guarantee the reroll to hit for the Possessed. My opponent, he had the Crown of the Wizard King on his Pharaoh, so he rolled for that and he got Awaken the Beast. And then for the rest he took Stars Line, Fate's Judgment, Ancestral Aid, and Hasten the Hour, so he also has the redundancy of the Stars Line and Ancestral Aid. So we are playing Counter Thrust and the Spoils of War. So you can see the two white markers a little bit to the left of the hill and a bit to the right of the hill. So Counter Thrust is not really the ideal deployment against Cultists, I feel, because with the low amount of drops that Cultists have, being limited to not being able to drop during the first 3 drops means that you only get a small bonus for starting against the Cultists if you decide to drop. Because, well, the Cultists, they do get a +6 to the roll for the deployment side, so they do get to choose the deployment side, basically. That does mean that your opponent can just drop as fast as you can. But with the fact that most Cultist armies are gonna have a lot of troops still to be summonable, they will probably not have a lot of drops. So, yeah, I mean, this effect of not being able to drop your entire army first is gonna limit the amount of the extra additional bonus you get on the roll. So even though my opponent still decides to drop the first opportunity he got, and he's gonna have a +3 on his roll, because I still have 1 unit of Cultist left, I still have 1 unit of Possessed left, and I still have my Demon Symbiote left, because the Cult Leader can scout. So how did my deployment work? I have a unit of Possessed that I wanted to deploy forward just to be able to zone out my opponent a little bit. And yeah, you can see that it worked quite well against the skeletons, because the skeletons are a little bit further beyond. So maybe my opponent should have actually just deployed first his skeletons, so that they would not suffer any movement losses, because he was basically going to know more or less where my units were going to be. So if he wanted to go for an aggressive game, then he should have probably just put the skeletons first in the middle of the board as the first deploy. I cut back one unit of possessed just to be able to counter deploy my opponent a bit. I am aware that I'm going to give my opponent a lot of opportunity to circle around me, but still it's Undying Dynasties, so they're not that mobile, so I do have a bit of an advantage there. Because the troops that he can freely walk around with, to some extent, are the skeleton horsemen. Just if he keeps them within 18 inches of his general, or within 12 inches only, they can still march one turn 16 inches, and next turn they will probably be set up for a charge or only need 8 inches to move. So they will not really be negatively impacted by the fact that the general is not close by anymore. And the Necro Sphinx is autonomous, so it can just perform on its own. So my opponent is not really used to playing with these kinds of aggressive armies. So that results in the fact that he pushed his skeleton block forward too far, in my opinion. So yeah, this is difficult for this matchup for him to get rid of the possessed. I think in his case I would not have put the skeleton chariots in ambush, because I don't have any means of getting to them with my army, and he can charge into me, he can get the impact hits, inflict some losses onto me, and then I'm in a worse shape, because he just has to wear down the possessed, sacrificing a unit probably, just to deal some damage. Try to get the Colossus in the side of the unit. But yeah, the setup that he has in the army is also not really ideal, because he only has two big blocks, being the Shaptis and the Skeletons. And the Skeletons, they do perform quite nicely in combat, because they do get the offensive and defensive bonus from the Pharaoh. But on the other hand, they're still only Skeletons, still only one attack, strength 3, which might not be enough. So yeah, he does have some threats. I think that in his play, the Colossus mostly was just misplayed, being in the wrong position, allowing me to make use of the gap in between his Necro Sphinx and the rest of his army. So I can reform in the way that you see. Now, why did I make this reform? So the possessed, they have 2 attacks each. If I'm 6 white or 7 white, I get 12 or 14 attacks from the first front row. My opponent has a block of skeletons that is 8 white. If he wants to charge into me, I'm fine with that, and I'm going to get more attacks if I go wider. And I don't really benefit from having ranks, because he's going to have more ranks than me anyway. So I might as well just optimize my attacks. If my opponent wants to charge in, that's fine by me. It's more fine by me if my opponent charges in than if I have to charge. That's mostly because I'm playing against Undead, and Undead, they are able to regrow their models in the magic phase. If he charges me, then the pace of the game is in disadvantage for him. And that's because if he charges, then it's going to be my turn next, so he's not going to have a magic phase before the second round of combat. If I charge in, however, then I'm going to do some damage, then he gets his magic phase, he can grow back. So probably with the possessed against the skeletons, if I do get a reroll to hit on my unit, it might not even matter too much, because I'm just going to do a lot of wounds. But it's just one of these things that, yeah, just minimizing your risks basically, because I still have an army that has to show up on the table. So basically the pressure is on my opponent to start doing stuff, and any turns that I gain is just advantages for me that I get. So he deploys his skeleton chariots with the underground ambush, and yeah, we thought it was the situation that because of the skeleton chariots have light troops, they can still reform and move around as they want. But I believe the banner says that if you're not standard size, you cannot do this or something, or I'm not really sure about this. Anyway, he gets his skeleton chariots on the board. What I didn't mention before is that I summon the Titan Slayer chariot on the right to zone out my opponent's Necrosphinx, which the chariot is doing very well. So this chariot, it has D3 plus 1 impact, it's at strength 7, so it's still gonna wound on 5s. So that's still not ideal. But the thing is, the chariot is only like 200 points, the Necrosphinx is like 500 points. And it has multiple wounds, 2, yeah, I believe 2, against Towering Presence. So if I do manage to get those lucky 2 rolls of a 5, it means that my opponent's Sphinx is likely gonna die, and yeah, that's a really good trade for me. That's a really good risk that I want to take. So as a zoning tool, it's really great, and it protects my my flank of my army from the Necrosphinx. So it's with this model, it's I believe mostly about the fear that your opponent gets from it being on the battlefield rather than the actual impact. So if you use it as such, then just for 200 points, it's a great deal, I think. And if you have 2 of them, then you can actually start killing off models. Yeah, so my opponent, he just generally advances a bit, trying to bring in the Ushabti. So I do have a nice counter for the Ushabti in my army list, which is the Clawed Fiends, because I get a +1 to wound on them. I have a higher offensive, and I believe I also get a +1 to hit for some reason. So anyway, in the end, I hit very well. I wound very well. So that's going to be great, basically. And then my opponent can hit me back, but I still have my Aegis save, etc. Yeah, so this is my my second turn. I charge into the skeletons with my possessed that are wider than his skeletons. Just because I don't want to end up in a standoff where he can have multiple charges into one of my units. So in this case, I think this army was positioned in a better way, which is Colossus being able to charge into the possessed together with the skeletons or the Ushabti. And now I can force a one-on-one engagement. I believe I actually have the Demon Symbiote in the unit that is standing in front of the Colossus. So this guy has 4 attacks with Titanic Might, so he goes to strength 8, and he has a spear, so he goes to AP 3. He's basically meant to kill off these gigantic models over time. Because if they're going to strike back, they're still going to strike against the defensive 5, I believe. Resilience 4, 2 plus armor save, 5 up Aegis save, 3 wound models. So likely they will not get him down in 1 round. And then the next round I'll likely just finish off his gigantic model. Yeah, so we summon up the Clawed Fiends in front of his Ushabti, and we go to combat. I do get some buffs onto my units, so I believe I do get the reroll to hit on my possessed. So I hit him on 4+. With a reroll, I have strength 5, so I wound him on 2+. Some of my possessed die, but we just use dice to indicate how many skeletons die, because it's a lot. It's like 25 or so. So that's yeah, they did a good job, these possessed. So because I start off with being 10 white, 20, 30, 35 attacks, more or less. Yeah, with the reroll to hit, with 2+ to wound, it's a slaughter fest, basically. So I do a lot of wounds, my opponent doesn't do a lot of wounds back, and everything crumbles down. So this Pharaoh is nice, but I think it shouldn't be run in a unit, just because generally the units that Undying Dynasties have are still quite fragile. They don't have a high defensive skill. They don't have a high armor save, and they don't really combine high resilience with any special rules or anything. So yeah, this Pharaoh is likely just better off on his own without any any combat rest that you can generate from a unit around it. Yeah, and we had against Colossus, my Demon Symbiote didn't do too well, so my opponent's Colossus still stands, unfortunately. But generally, I think that I'm doing fine. So my opponent's Necropolis Guard cannot get into my Possessed, which is great. The Necrosphinx of my opponent charges into my Cultists on the top right. They're outside of 18 inches of my cult leader, so they don't get this discipline. They only have discipline 6 themselves, so they failed the terror check and they actually run away. But it's not too bad of a thing, because I could still rally on a 6, right? But with this field charge, he's going to be within line of sight of my Titan Slayer chariot, so I can actually have a chance at seeing what's going to happen if I charge that one into it. The chariots, they try to charge into the rear of my Possessed, but they don't make it, unfortunately. So this was a bit of a long charge, but still, it could have happened. And my opponent still has to struggle with the fact that I have a Blazing Glory that's threatening his mage bunker at this moment. So he still wants to protect his mages a little bit, so they are going to be both at one side of the unit. I believe even one mage goes out of the unit, and he is chaffing my Possessed up with a Scorpion, just so that I cannot get into the skeletons in this turn with my Possessed. So I probably should have reformed my Possessed in the turn before, going instead of 10 wide to a little bit of a less clumsy formation. Yeah. So overall, I feel like this Undying Dynasties list is not really a great counter to the list that I have. Just because these Possessed, you really need to be able to take them off with ranged damage, because yeah, in combat they're just powerhouses basically. If you can remove like half of them before you get into combat, then they're manageable. Otherwise, they're definitely not manageable. Yeah, then we go to the combat with the Hoarders. So I knock off quite a lot of wounds there. So I believe I killed like 3 of them. My opponent did 5 wounds back, so that still put on some hurt, of course. But on the other hand, my opponent still loses 2 models due to crumbling. And then in the future rounds, well, right now my damage potential didn't really go down by that much. My opponent's damage potential is going to go down real quickly because I get to strike first. I'm going to remove still 2 models or more. So my opponent is only going to attack back with 2 models, probably. And that will not put a lot of hurt onto my unit. Yeah, so yeah, at this point it's basically already just mopping up the pieces that my opponent has left. Titan Slayer Chariot went into the Necrosphinx, the Possessed they go into the Necropolis Guard, the other Possessed go into the Scorpion, and then later change of formation to take on the Chariot. So yeah, whether they will remove the Scorpion or not is still a little bit of a question. But if I get a reroll to hit on them, then they will probably manage. So I still have my Lemurs at this point. I don't think they'll be really useful anymore. So the funny thing about this list is that you can just specifically summon up the counters that you have bought in your army list to specific units of your opponent. So that is really strong. But I don't think the Lemurs really fit in there because they're basically just an anvil. So you just can put something stuck somewhere forever. But yeah, then I'd rather have just Succubi that can actually also kill something. Maybe lose a couple of models in return, but just kill something. Especially with the reroll to hit, reroll to wound magic that you have. I feel like Succubi are the better choice there. So the cultists themselves, they're actually dishing it out with the skeleton horsemen. I have more bodies, but we both hit on force, we wound on force. My opponent starts with more attacks, but we're both not very good at killing the other. So I believe I actually grind them down there. Yeah, and what happens otherwise? The Blazing Glory is just chomping away on the skeletons. Yeah, but basically by this time the game is already kind of over. So the Titan Slayer Chariot, he charged into the Necro Sphinx and actually did a couple of wounds. So in the end, after combat rest, it's 4 wounds because he did 1 wound back. So I had a charge in the flank. He did a wound, so I probably did 3 wounds. Because I have 3 wounds. I don't know if it's also construct. I think I did 3 wounds. Yeah, I think the crew also did a wound still. Yeah. Yeah. So I did put in a big chunk of his health points that I removed. But on the other hand, it's not dead yet. But I think these Titan Slayer chariots are in the right price range for what they do. It's just that normally these pieces, in most armies, they feature as either artillery for the price that they're at, or in more expensive specific tools, like costing 350 points or so, and then really being able to remove the target pieces from the game. So then if a Titan Slayer Chariot had been 350 points, it would have had like 3d3 plus 3 impact hits at strength 7 or so, which would not work against infantry for some reason or something. Yeah, so this is how the cultist army is able to work, basically. I think it's a nice list. I am thinking about maybe including also some units of cultists, just like I'm fielding. Right now, the ones that I'm fielding, they have the upgrade that they have a standard bearer that can also perform the demonic summon, so that I can have more versatility and flexibility in where I summon my units. You can also upgrade them with an upgrade where they get a champion with the Wizard Conclave rule, so that he has the Spear of Infinity spell. So then basically you're transforming your core into a little bit of a bolt thrower style gun line, but you do sacrifice some magic potential for that. But each of these cultist units, they can also perform a sacrificial offering each turn. So if you have like 3 of these units, you have 3 times the Spear of Infinity that you can cast on a 3+, because you get the +1 to cast from the offering. And for each spell you cast before, you get a +1 strength on the Spear of Infinity, so you can really spam it quite effectively. And it also helps against these single models, even though it's only AP2, the Spear of Infinity. So if you face something with a 1+ armor save, rerollable, then the Spear of Infinity is not really gonna help you. Yeah, so maybe I should change some Titan Slayer chariots actually for this spear, but yeah, I'll have a think about that, but we'll see. Yeah, so my opponent's army, he wasn't really too happy about his army composition afterwards. I think it's mostly because, yeah, after all, the skeletons are still just skeletons. I also face this with my vampire counts. You sometimes try to make something interesting out of skeletons. Like with Lamia, you can go to offensive, defensive 6, I believe, with a commandment. But then you would also want to put in the Court of the Damned. And then it kind of works because basically you're just improving the defensive skill of your skeletons and still having them as meat shields. So you still give them a shield for the parry. You have defensive 6, so you go actually to the defensive 7 with parry. So a lot of troops will start to hit you on 5+ instead of 4+. And you have witchcraft magic to make it possibly even worse. But then you have the coach in there, the court of the damned, with the vampire to do the real defensive or the real offense out of that. Then again, if you face multiple cannons, then you're just done for the game, basically. So I don't know if Undying Dynasties will be able to do this skeleton trick. But on the other hand, you could also field like 6 units of Necropolis Guard with or without any characters in them, and then completely go to town with these because they really stack up way better than Graveguard does for the Vampire Count army. Yeah, so the Titan Slayer Chariot, I believe he in the end did finish the Necrosphinx, and after tying up the points, it was very easy to conclude that it was a 20-0 for the Cultists. So it was a bit of a shorter one, a bit of a more simple one, but I still hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching and see you the next time.